Today we're going to talk about the organs and augmentations that make a Space Marine more than a regular man. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where we're usually all about tactics and strategy, but today we're going to relax for a bit and just talk about a bit of the background and lore. Recently I got quite interested by all the augmentations that an aspiring neophyte must undergo to become a fully fledged Space Marine. So today we're going to talk about each one of these organs, what part it has to play in making a superhuman, and what sort of relation it has to real world anatomy and physiology. Those who are recruited to be Space Marines must be fairly young, as many of the organs and implants must be applied as the body grows to have maximal effect. In the backgrounds, the aspirants must also be male, as the science was developed for male hormones and tissue types supposedly. I think the creation of female Space Marines is a topic we won't touch in this discussion. The organs and augmentations are introduced in phases, optimally when an aspirant is between 10 and 16 years old, and are introduced in many separate phases. The organs themselves are grown from a chapter's gene seed, a type of germ cell, which has the potential to grow into all the other organs, much like the sperm and egg in traditional human anatomy. This gene seed is cultured in the Marines themselves, in the Progenoid glands in their sternum and at the back of their neck, as the Imperium has lost the ability to create new gene seed. Therefore, a chapter's survival is linked to being able to repeatedly harvest these cultures from the Marines, as only then can they develop the new organs and implantations to recruit new Marines to the chapter. This is why it can be dangerous if a chapter loses too many Marines all at once, as this is a limiting factor as to how many Marines can be created. With only a limited amount of genetic material, they will only be able to create a limited amount of organs, and therefore that limits the amount of Marines that they can recruit. So let's get into these super organs and anatomy themselves then. The first of these that's implanted straight away is the secondary heart, also known as the maintainer. It's slightly smaller than the original and is implanted near the original heart to boost cardiac output and increase the blood flow and oxygen supply to the muscles to levels far greater than a normal human will be able to maintain. The other major advantage of the secondary heart is that it can act as a reserve should the original be damaged, meaning that even if you stab a Space Marine through the heart, they'll keep on living as they have another one. Always good to have a little bit of redundancy there. In real life, runners and athletes often have greatly enlarged hearts with great cardiac output and very low resting heart rates, so having two of them beating along at once could theoretically increase this even further. Secondly, we have the os modular, also known as the iron heart, which is implanted alongside the neophyte's pituitary gland at the base of the brain. The pituitary gland secretes hormones and regulates other hormones in the body, such as corticosteroids and growth hormone, and also regulates testosterone, so it's pretty vital in itself. The os modular works alongside this, adding some specially engineered human growth hormone to the mix, which is one of the primary reasons for the enormous growth in Space Marine muscles and bone. The neophytes eat a special diet laced with microscopic ceramic minerals, which the os modular directly incorporates into bone. Its name is derived of osseous, which means all things bony in real life, and I believe it's important that this one will be introduced before an aspirant reaches adulthood, as you can only actually grow bones longer for a limited time. Children's bones have a cartilage bit in them, which is the only bit that can grow, called the growth plate, and these turn entirely to bone when you're between 16 to 18 years old, meaning that no further lengthening of bone can happen after that. Finally, the effects of this could be likened to acromegaly or gigantism, where people with this condition produce additional amounts of growth hormone, causing them to be very tall in stature and have more greatly developed muscles, but it also puts them at risk of many other medical conditions, particularly things like heart disease and defects and osteoarthritis. Presumably the Space Marines are doing this in a way that doesn't cause those things. Third on the list we have the biscopia. It's a small circular organ that's implanted into the chest cavity, and it's another hormone secreting gland that works in tandem with the os modular to increase muscle size primarily. Number 4 on the list is the hemostamen, which is also known as the blood maker. This organ is implanted into a main blood vessel such as the aorta, femoral artery or vena cava, and increases the blood's capacity to carry oxygen and nutrients more efficiently. I can only presume that it probably works by using more hemoglobin in the blood, as it does say in the background that their blood is a brighter shade of red than normal humans. In normal humans, hemoglobin is transported in the red cells of the blood and picks up oxygen in the small blood vessels of the lungs, where oxygen is rich in concentration, and drops it off in the muscles and other tissues in the body to allow them to stay alive and and allows them to process glucose into energy via respiration, which is what gives your muscles power. If the muscles start working beyond the blood's oxygen carrying capacity, then it gives you anaerobic respiration and gives you lactic acid buildup, so having oxygen-rich blood is certainly a positive. This is why runners often train at high altitude, where oxygen is scarce, and this causes the body to produce more red blood cells. This means that when they're at lower altitudes and running hard, they won't get as much anaerobic respiration and lactic acid buildup that tires muscles out. It's also the same sort of process that's used in blood doping, where you siphon off a bunch of an athlete's red cells and inject them back into them for artificially increased oxygen carrying capacity. And it's banned in sport because it's cheating and can also cause serious medical emergencies such as blood clots. Basically, Space Marines seem to be blood doping themselves, but I can only imagine in a way that doesn't cause them unpleasant side effects. Moving on, we have Larraman's organ, which is also known as the healer. This is a very small organ, no bigger than a golf ball, that's inserted into the human chest cavity, and its function is to harbour tiny Larraman cells, which act in a very similar capacity to a normal human's platelets. Platelets are tiny cell fragments that cause clots to form when you bleed for a while, so you don't just keep on bleeding and bleed to death. They typically react when they're exposed to air, or there's some disruption in blood vessel walls. Larraman cells are far more advanced than these, actively being secreted by this organ when the body is injured, and are carried by the immune system's white blood cells to the site of the injury. There they form a near instantaneous barrier of scar tissue, quickly preventing blood loss and infection to the wound. The rapid actions of this organ are one of the reasons that Space Marines are incredibly hard to kill, even when sustaining the most grievous of injuries. In normal humans, this process naturally takes far longer, with the platelets initially forming a blood clot and scab, then the skin's epithelial cells migrate under the scab to reform your skin barrier. Moving on, we have the catalepsian node, which is also known as the unsleeping. It's the 6th of the 19 gene-seed organs, and is implanted into the brain's cerebral hemispheres just above the brainstem. When a Space Marine is deprived of sleep or rest for a long time, the catalepsian node takes action, and it causes the Space Marine to sequentially switch off different areas of the brain for a bit to mimic sleeping, while the Marine as a whole remains functional, though their abilities may be slightly reduced. Prolonged use of this node is hazardous, and can potentially induce hallucinations or psychosis. Regular humans can't survive without sleep for extended periods, and people have been known to die for lack of it. The Space Marine technique of sequential sleeping is actually quite similar to what dolphins and whales do in real life, to remain semi-alert while slowly drifting through the ocean. Supposedly back in the 41st millennium, the record for active duty is held by a Crimson Fist kill team, where a squad remained on duty for 328 solar hours during the battle against the Orcs for Rin's world. The preomnor is also known as a neutralizer and is the 7th of the organs. It's connected to their human digestive tract, where typically food passes through it and is analysed before proceeding into the stomach. It has the power to neutralise most known biochemical or inorganic toxins, and things that it isn't able to neutralise it can isolate, storing it there before being able to be vomited back up later. It also functions with the Becher's gland, one of the other augmentations we'll talk about, where the toxins are often routed there to essentially allow a Space Marine to spit venom. The omophagia, which is also known as the remembrancer, is an organ implanted into the spinal cord and wired into the central nervous system, directly attached to both the cerebral cortex of the brain and also to the Space Marine's stomach. This allows the Astartes the unusual ability to be able to gain memories from ingested tissue, whether that's a fallen enemy combatant or an animal native to a planet. This is supposedly absorbed via DNA, RNA and protein sequences in the ingested cells, which can allow them to gain additional knowledge of the planet or the foe that they are fighting. This organ is the reason that certain Space Marine chapters are known to eat flesh, particularly ones such as the Blood Drinkers and Flesh Tearers, though the Space Wolves have also been known to use this, and is even represented by a stratagem in the new saga of the Beast book. In reality, it'd be hard to imagine how this would work from a scientific point of view. DNA is genetic material and is pretty stable throughout life and doesn't change based on memories or experiences, though I suppose RNA and proteins are more dependent on what an organism's actually done recently, though they're very much the mechanics of how the body is working rather than the actual memories, which are stored in complex patterns in the neurons of the brain. Ninth on the list we have the multi-lung, also known as the imbiber. This one is a third lung, connected to the trachea in the same sort of way as the other two, where typically the trachea goes down to the two lungs, then divides into the two main bronchi, the air tubes that supply both lungs. The additional lung increases the breathing capacity, getting more oxygen into the body from the environment, which of course is great for muscles, and the lung also has the ability to shut off the other two lungs and only use it if the Marines happen to be in a toxic environment, as unlike regular lungs, the multi-lung has the ability to filter out toxins and poisons, and also pick up oxygen at lower concentrations than standard lungs. Moving on, we have the oculobe, which is also known as the eye of vengeance, and this sits adjacent to the optic nerve that supplies the retina at the back of the eye and allows the chapter's apothecaries to make adjustment to the growth patterns of the eyes and increase the concentration of the light receptive cells there. The amount of cells on the retina can vary between people and in particular between species, where animals such as eagles, for example, are well known to have far more per square millimetre than a human has, allowing them crystal clear vision at very long distances, and other animals to have far enhanced night vision, allowing them to get maximal information out of the light that's incident on the eye. The upshot of this is that space marines can see far further than normal humans, see a dimly lit battlefield as if it were plain daylight, and probably do better than you at reading the letters on the Snellen chart at the opticians. Next we come to Lyman's ear, which is also known as the sentinel, and interestingly replaces only one of the two Space Marine ears rather than both of them. Its improved inner ear structure means that Space Marines are more immune to dizziness and motion sickness, as it's the semicircular canals and the movement of fluid within them that typically cause this via messing with your sense of balance when you're turned upside down. And it has the unusual ability for a marine to essentially be able to filter out sounds from their environment and focus on one very low noise. Space Marines can kind of manipulate their own audio in real time. Next we come to the Suzanne membrane, which is also known as the hibernator, and to me sounds like it's very much been named after a woman called Susan. I'm afraid I can't corroborate this. This membrane wraps the neophyte's brain and lies dormant without the correct chemical therapy and training. Sufficient practice and instruction, however, can allow a Space Marine to hibernate for many Terran years, potentially even if they've been grievously injured in the line of duty. This can allow a fallen battle brother to be covered potentially years later, and a particularly notable case includes battle brother Silas of the Dark Angels, who was reportedly revived well over 500 years of going into his hibernation. Naturally, this borrows from the ability of animals to hibernate, shutting the body down into its barest capacities and dropping the heart rate to burn less energy over winter or a period of scarcity. Makes me wonder whether they have to eat quite a lot to put on some fat before they go into this hibernation. Next up is the melanochrome, which is also known as the skin shield. This is a hormonal implant that's attached to the human lymphatic system and helps to regulate the amount of melanin in a Space Marine's skin. Melanin is a real hormone, and in humans who aren't superhumans, it's secreted by melanocytes that are intermingled in the skin's epidermis, where melanin is secreted to shield the cell nuclei of the other cells that make up the skin and helps protect their nuclei from radiation. This is the process that causes tanning, and different people from different parts of the world naturally have greater or lesser amounts of skin pigmentation, with people living towards the poles typically having lighter skin as they less need the protection from radiation, and people who live around the equator tend to have darker skin on the whole, at least historically. Incidentally, melanocytes are also the ones that cause melanomas, due to them being better at protecting other cells than they are themselves, so their own genetic material is at risk of radiation and can cause cancer. The cancerous lesions appear as dark spots due to the pigment that they secrete. Going back to the 41st millennium, the melanochrome causes significant variation depending on the different Space Marine chapters, such as the Blood Angels with little exposure to radiation having unusually pale skin compared with the jet black skin of the salamanders and their red eyes. Next we come to the oolitic kidney, which is also known as the purifier. In the real world, oolitic gives its name to a type of limestone and sedimentary rock, and it means composed of small spheres, so presumably this is a very lumpy, weird looking kidney. Normally, your kidneys are the organs that filter your blood and basically keep the blood in balance, secreting waste products such as urea in urine, where they drain down the ureters to the bladder and then out. I'm not 100% sure where the oolitic kidney is plumbed in all this, but as well as amplifying the ability to process poisons, it can also go into overdrive and perform an emergency detoxification of the Space Marine, should all of their other defences be overwhelmed. This detoxification procedure is quite traumatic, however, and it renders the Astartes out of action while it happens, so it's naturally very dangerous if it happens during combat. It's very much a last line of defence if everything else is overrun. The 15th organ is known as the neuroglottis, aka the devourer. Its name comes from neuro, meaning to do with nerves, and glottis, which means to do with the throat. Despite this, it's actually implanted into the nose, in your upper nasal passages, where your olfactory nerve lives, the one that allows you to smell. This improved sense of smell gives a Space Marine a similar sense of smell to that of dogs that are bred for tracking, who can detect tiny traces of their prey from long distances away, and use them to locate their direction. It can also allow them to assess any substance for whether or not it has nutritional value, and whether or not it poses a toxic threat to the body. These Marines really do have quite a lot of defences against poisons and things. Next we have the mucranoid, which is also known as the weaver, which works in combination with the Suzanne membrane to allow that state of suspended animation via helping secrete a waxy substance through the skin, which helps protect the marine's extremities to long periods out of action. This has the potential to even protect them from the harshness of a space vacuum and curbs the worst excesses of harm from extremes of temperature, such as frozen environments. The 17th augmentation is the Betcher's gland, which is known as the poison bite. This consists of 2 glands, which can be implanted anywhere inside the Space Marine's mouth, such as the lower lip or on the hard palate. When activated, these can transform the Space Marine's saliva into a highly corrosive, blinding acid. This Betcher chap must have been taking some inspiration from the natural world again, from things like spiders or cobras that can spit venomous substances, so in a superhuman, why not give them the ability as well? As well as being a potential aggressive weapon, it can also be used to digest more difficult to digest foodstuffs, which could be all that is available if a marine is stranded off-world. Next we have one of the most important organs, which is the progenoid glands, and we mentioned these earlier as these are where the gene seed is kept and reproduced. Every space marine have these organs, one implanted on their neck and another in the chest, where the cells that contain the all-important gene seed are grown over time. These cells are germ cells, much like sperm or egg cells in the testes or ovaries of normal men and women, and in normal times they are harvested routinely by apothecaries to extract these cells and allow them to be cultured into new organs. These certainly have a sort of similarity with stem cells, cells that can be differentiated into multiple types and are often present in fetuses early in development, though some remain in certain areas of human bone marrow. Most cells are somewhat already differentiated, so can't be used to develop into anything, only certain other cells, and this makes them less useful for creating other tissues and organs in the lab. These glands are also the things that are removed via an apothecary, who will use their surgical reductor attachment to remove these glands upon a Space Marine battle brother's death, which is an important duty, as without them the chapter will quickly wither and die. Finally, for normal Space Marines, we come to the black carapace, a neural interface that is the last of the organs to be introduced to an aspirant, and is a black organic fibrous material that's implanted directly under the skin on the neophyte's torso. This synthetic fibre is both attached to the nervous system and also has ports on the outside as well, where it meshes with the power armour that the Space Marine wears, allowing the sophisticated Space Marine power armour to act in tandem with the Marine's body, the augmenting machinery moving with the Space Marine far more freely than it would for, say, a Sister of Battle or Inquisitor, who both also make use of power armour technology. Having technology that directly feeds into a nervous system is potentially something that could be happening for humanity in the future, and in some cases is already used for things like alleviating pain with electromagnetic stimulation. Anything that breaks the skin, though, does pose a significant infection risk, as the skin is the main barrier that stops microorganisms from entering the body, and having bits of technology poke through it that can't be accessed by the immune system is typically not the best idea. Now, as we all know, Belisarius Core has been making some upgrades to the Emperor's designs, giving Primaris Space Marines 3 additional augmentations. The first of these are the sinew coils, or the steel within, which are metallic cables that are interwoven with a Primaris Marine's muscle structure, both improving the strength of these muscles and massively increasing the resistance to being overextended, as well as providing another layer of protection. I'm afraid I'm not entirely familiar with the lore of how all these metal cables get there. If they're individually placed into every muscle, I can only imagine that that's a very, very long and painful procedure. Along with the sinew coils, the Magnificat is also implanted fairly early in an aspirant's journey to become a Space Marine. This one is known as the Amplifier, and essentially works with the Osmodular and Biscopia to basically do what they did before, but better. The Magnificat uses part of the Emperor's Primaris project, and is half of the dual gland Immortis gland, which is also known as the Godmaker, and is what sets the Primarchs apart from regular Space Marines. The Immortis gland has 2 halves, and Core was only able to recollate the Magnificat out of the 2, otherwise presumably would be flooded with Primarchs right now, and Rabute Gilliman wouldn't be feeling very special anymore. Finally, we come to the Belisarian Furnace, also known as the Revitalizer, which is a last-ditch failsafe for an injured Primaris Marine. This organ is dormant in all times but the most extreme of trauma, when it essentially acts as a stimulant injector, expelling streams of self-synthesized chemicals into the body's circulation. It sounds very much the equivalent of an adrenaline injection, which causes the heart to beat faster and harder, and the body to be put in fight or flight mode. I believe it has been experimentally used in the real world in military applications, though generally any potential benefit is outweighed by the risks of causing sudden onset cardiac arrhythmia and death. Adrenaline is also used by intensive care professionals for patients whose hearts just need a little bit of extra support when the body's going through a tough time and is under a lot of strain, whether that's from a severe disease or multiple trauma of some sort. So we've come to the end of our breakdown of everything that sets a Space Marine apart from a regular human, and while you're probably not going to be able to beat one in an arm wrestling contest, I found it quite fun to just have a look at the lore and compare it to some real world science. If there's any other relations to the real world that any of these have that you can think of, then please let me know down in the comments. It'll be fun to have a read. At some point in the future I might make another one talking about the various genetic flaws of the Space Marines, but for the most part over the next week we'll go back to tactics as our main focus. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, and if you've been watching regularly and would like to support the channel, then I do have a Patreon page which is linked down in the description below. As well as being able to see new videos a bit early and helping keep them coming by supporting the channel, you also get to have input on what sort of videos come next by voting on them in fairly regular polls, and there's the chance to win miniatures with prize draws once every couple of months. If any of that sounds interesting to you, or you'd just like to see these videos keep on coming, then the link is down in the description below, and of course a big thank you to my current Patreons for making this channel possible. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.